Everybody has a different method of gardening. What works for one person may not work for another. We can debate all day about the right and wrong way to grow food at home, but in the end, you, the grower, need to decide what works best for you. Hey guys, Robbie with Fast Gardening Michigan. Today we're going to be going over 5 different gardening methods to see if we can help you figure out which one is right for you. Whether you're a beginner that just wants to figure out how to grow your own food, or you're a seasoned veteran and maybe you want to change things up a little bit, I'm going to lay out the pros and cons of these 5 different methods. In the end, you can decide. The first method is going to be deep cultivation, which is basically rototilling. Now this is my least favorite method, but I'm going to try to stay unbiased here and just give you the legitimate pros and cons. Tilling allows you to prepare large planting spaces. And some people believe when you put organic matter or manure, fertilizers on top of the soil, and you go through with a rototiller, you're mixing that into the soil. And in turn, that puts all the nutrients where your plant roots are eventually going to be. Some believe it's a good way to get rid of weeds. You chop them up, they refertilize into the soil. And some people even use it during the season to clear their rows so there aren't any weeds in those rows. So those are the arguments to the good side. But what about the cons? If you follow this channel long enough, you know I am a recovering rototiller addict. So I've seen what tilling can do to your garden. All the really good stuff happens below the soil. That's where all the beneficial predatory insects, the earthworms that break down organic matter, the fungal network, they all live in there. So when you go through with that rototiller, you're chopping them up. So you're basically wiping out a whole beneficial ecosystem. And it might look good at first when you rototill those weeds and you got nice clean soil, but all you're doing is spreading all those seeds that were on the surface and planting them. When you got stuff like thistles, stuff that's spread through rhizomes, you're chopping them roots up, you're actually creating more of those. So they spread a lot easier. I had a big thistle problem and it was all due to rototilling. Another issue I had was water retention. We had a big drought here last summer and I noticed I was watering my plants a lot. Every time I tilled my soil, it looked nice and damp and rich, but after a couple days, it started looking like the surface of the moon. It was just dust. When I stopped tilling, that went away. If you want to use this method like a lot of people do, not going to hold it against you. That is completely up to you. Like I said, this is an unbiased look at different gardening methods. We're going to talk about no-till later on in this video, so stick around for that. For now, let's move on. Next method we're going to talk about is raised garden beds. Now, if tilling isn't number one, raised garden beds probably is. They're especially popular for people that can't get on their hands and knees anymore. They can just stand up to work on their gardens. If you fit this criteria, this is the way to go. Raised garden beds also allow you to create your own soil. You can make the soil to your liking. If you start your beds out right, it's easy to stop weeds from getting in there. Fertily amended soil and raised garden beds, you can implement the square foot gardening technique and you can actually grow a lot of food in small places. But what about the cons? I've grown in raised garden beds in the past, still do now. It's definitely not my go-to. Building your beds costs money. It also takes a lot of time. My least favorite part of raised garden beds is filling them. The good soil and amendments you want to use are pretty expensive. There's a lot of videos going around about how to fill your beds up for cheap, which you pretty much put branches, logs, hay, stuff like that inside there, and it eats up some of the space, and then you just put maybe like 8-10 inches of soil on top of that. But on the other hand, we're seeing some videos come out too with people saying that that's not working out that great. Take that as you will. Someone's right, someone's wrong. If it's still working for you, keep at it. Another con is it seems like the soil loses energy every year, so you have to constantly amend the beds. That takes fertilizer and compost, which is also expensive. When you amend that soil in your beds, any weed seeds that are on top are getting mixed in and they're going to pop up next year. Similar to the raised beds, we have container gardening. This might be the only option for you if you live in an urban environment. You can grow food on your back porch, on a balcony, use planter boxes, 5-gallon buckets, pots, basically anything you can think of. You grow plants in containers. It also gives you the ability to move your plants around. So maybe later in the season, you're not getting as much sun somewhere. You can move your plants somewhere else. I grew quite a few plants in containers this year, and I did move them a lot. I did have some troubles with my container gardening. One thing I noticed was I had to water my plants a lot. The soil did not retain moisture well. I actually thought I was going to have a problem with too much moisture getting into the soil and the drain holes not working as good as they need to, but that was not the case. I also noticed, compared to plants I actually put out in the garden, my container plants were not as big and did not have as high a yield. I think this goes towards the extra fertilization you need to do when growing in containers. When you have a small amount of soil, the plant's going to use up all those nutrients in there, so you're going to have to keep pumping more into the containers. But if growing in containers was my only option because I didn't have the space to grow outside, I would definitely take the extra time to make sure I gave them the fertilizer they needed and the proper watering. This is also a good option if you just want to grow plants indoors during the wintertime. Alright, really excited about this one. We're moving on to my favorite, no-till gardening. If you follow my channel, you know I made the transition about mid-season last year after getting frustrated with my till garden. And you were able to watch how converting to a no-till system really helped me out. So the number one pro about this is it is the healthiest way to grow. One of the big pros is I don't have to till anymore. I don't have to spend money on gasoline. I don't have to spend my time out there trying to churn up soil. No-till utilizes deep mulching. The deep mulch holds all that moisture in there, so I have to water my plants a lot less, which is great. I hate watering plants. I also use a lot less fertilizer because all the different mulches I use break down like a composting action on the surface and feed my soil. One of the things we really go overboard on is coating our whole gardens with different soil amendments and mixing it in. You really only need to concentrate it where you're growing. So during this growing season, I'm going to show you some videos of how I plant into my no-till permaculture garden and how I concentrate my compost and fertilizers into small spaces, so I'm not just wasting it throughout my garden. So much cheaper. I think the best part of the no-till system is leaving everything underground alone. All that beneficial stuff you never see, not disturbing them, just letting them work. You let them work under the surface, they're going to work for you. It creates a natural environment and everything balances out. I can only think of one con when it came to setting up my no-till garden. That had to be the amount of time it took to set it up. As you may know, I started out coating my whole garden with spoiled hay. I put cardboard on top of that, more hay on top of that. In my perennial areas, I also threw a layer of wood chips on top. Now I'm growing on a 1/4 acre. That's a lot of work, but we're definitely getting there. She's almost done. Expect to see a lot of no-till permaculture gardening videos from me in the future because I think it is the greatest thing ever and more people need to be doing it. It seems like it's getting pretty popular, and I'm telling you, it's something to consider. Now the last method I'm going to talk about is kind of like no-till, but it's also no-dig. I am not a no-dig gardener. I've never tried no-dig, but it kind of follows along the lines of the no-till system. I think the biggest benefit with no-dig is not having weeds. And if you do get weeds, they're really easy to pull out. Basically what you're doing is building a garden on the surface of the soil, pretty much just layering up as you plant. If you're interested in no-dig gardening, I think Charles Dowding is probably the biggest channel that talks about it on YouTube. He's got some really good videos on it. I know it works for a lot of people, but the reason I have not done it is because I don't want to spend the money to do it. I can get the cardboard, but the amount of compost I need to put on top of the cardboard, I just don't want to spend money on that. And I can make a lot of compost here when I'm composting with my chickens, my compost bins, but I can't make that much. And even if I could, I don't know if I'd go no-dig. Because in nature, there is digging. Just look at squirrels, chipmunks, they dig. It's a natural thing. With my permaculture garden, as long as it's natural, it's okay with me. These were only 5 methods with the dirty gardening hands. There are a lot more out there. There's some weird ones out there too. We'll probably talk about those in a later video. But hopefully through my experience, I broke down these 5 for you so you can decide which one works best for you. And you might choose more than one, which is cool too. It's good to be versatile. If you guys could, leave me some feedback in the comments. Make sure you like the video. Subscribe to the channel. You guys have really helped me out in the past month or so. The channel's growing pretty quick, and it's all because of you guys. I have not forgotten some of the original names that still pop up that have been here since the beginning. Got a big season coming up, so I hope you guys stick around. See you on the next one, and thanks for watching.